Roy Chen's steel-plated boots echoed ominously through the pristine, sterile halls of NovaGenix's research complex. He hauled an unconscious Kai Rains, his limp body draped over his shoulder, through the labyrinth of advanced technology and clinical precision. Guards and technicians stepped aside, their eyes avoiding Roy's, though their curiosity burned. No one dared question the sight of the infamous Core-Sec leader carrying the most wanted fugitive in the world. Roy entered a reinforced chamber at the heart of the facility, where Dr. Vivian Kessler waited. The room was a marvel of cutting-edge science, an arena of white light and chrome, with surgical precision embedded in every detail. A metallic table, equipped with restraints and advanced monitoring systems, dominated the center. Screens displayed streams of data, ready to analyze the most minute biological details of any subject. "He's all yours," Roy grunted, tossing Kai onto the table as though he were nothing more than a sack of grain. With swift efficiency, technicians activated the restraints, locking Kai's arms and legs in place. A sleek collar snapped around his neck, its tiny red light signaling its active suppression of his enhanced abilities. Kai stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His hypercognitive senses tried to kick in, but the collar rendered them useless. The weight of his confinement and the throbbing ache from the neuralizer blasts clouded his thoughts. He glanced around, his eyes finally landing on Dr. Kessler. "You must be the infamous Dr. Kessler," he rasped, his voice dripping with defiance despite his weakened state. "Do you always greet your guests like this?" Kessler's gaze was cold but curious. She stepped closer, her white lab coat pristine against the backdrop of monitors. "You should consider yourself fortunate, Mr. Rains," she replied, her tone clinical. "You are an anomaly, a living, breathing contradiction of everything we know about genetic enhancement. 5 doses of Evolix should have liquefied your brain. Yet here you are, mocking me." Kai smirked weakly. "Guess I'm just built different." Ignoring his sarcasm, Kessler activated the scanning systems. A dome descended over Kai, emitting a soft hum as waves of light swept across his body. Data filled the screens, detailing every aspect of his physiology. Kessler's sharp eyes scanned the results, her expression unreadable. But then she froze. Her eyes widened as a specific pattern in Kai's genetic structure illuminated on the screen. It was unmistakable, a rare anomaly she had seen only once before, buried in her memories like a dormant ghost. 30 earlier, a young Vivian Kessler had been a bright-eyed geneticist, brimming with optimism. Her brother, Theo, had been her world, a curious and imaginative boy who dreamed of exploring the stars. But his body betrayed him, ravaged by a genetic disorder that sapped his strength and dimmed his light far too soon. Vivian had dedicated her life to finding a cure, pouring every ounce of her brilliance into research. But time had not been on her side. Theo died before she could make her breakthrough. The memory of his frail hand in hers, his voice whispering, "Don't stop trying," haunted her. It was the catalyst that propelled her into the morally gray waters of NovaGenix's experiments. She believed that no one else should endure the helplessness she had felt, even if it meant sacrificing her own humanity. Now, staring at Kai's genetic profile, Vivian saw echoes of Theo in the data. The same mutation that had doomed her brother was present, but Kai's multi-dose Evolix treatment had transformed it into something extraordinary. His anomaly wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. "This can't be," she murmured, her voice trembling. Her hands hovered over the controls as if afraid to confirm the truth. Kai watched her reaction, his sharp eyes narrowing. "You found something, didn't you?" Kessler snapped out of her trance, her professional mask slipping back into place. Your genetic structure is unique. That much is obvious, she said evasively. But her mind churned with questions and revelations. If the multi-dose Evolix protocol could stabilize such mutations, what else could it achieve? Could it have saved Theo? The implications were staggering, but so were the ethical dilemmas. Kessler's pursuit of human enhancement had always been driven by personal loss, yet here was proof that her methods had spiraled into something far darker than she had ever intended. And NovaGenix's role in exploiting this discovery, in weaponizing it, sickened her. Kai's voice broke through her thoughts. I can see it in your eyes, Doc. You're questioning everything. Feels pretty awful, doesn't it? Kessler glared at him, but her resolve was weakening. You don't know anything about me. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to lose someone. And I know what it's like to see the truth for what it is, even when it's ugly. She hesitated, her hands clenched into fists. You think you're some kind of martyr? You think this rebellion of yours will change anything? I don't think. I know, Kai shot back. Because people like you, with all your brilliance, can't keep ignoring what's right in front of you. You've seen what NovaGenix does. You've seen the experiments, the children they've discarded like trash. How many more have to die before you decide enough is enough? Kessler's breath caught. She'd buried the memories of those experiments deep, rationalizing them as necessary sacrifices for progress. But Kai's words, and his defiant gaze, unearthed them with brutal clarity. If you're so sure of yourself, she said, her voice brittle, prove it. Let me see what you've seen. Kai's lips curled into a grim smile. Be my guest. With a deep breath, Kessler activated her telepathic abilities, delving into Kai's mind. Images flooded her consciousness. Horrific scenes of children in cages, their cries muffled by sterile walls. She saw the experiments, the cold detachment of the scientists, and the lifeless eyes of those who didn't survive. And beneath it all, she felt Kai's fury, his grief, and his unwavering resolve to stop the atrocities. But then, a new memory emerged, one that made Kessler's heart stop. A young girl, terrified and struggling, being dragged into a NovaGenix facility. Kessler recognized her immediately, her niece, Lila, who had vanished without a trace years ago. Kessler's connection to Kai's mind severed abruptly. She staggered back, her face pale and her breath ragged. What did you see? Kai asked, his voice softer now. Kessler didn't answer. Her mind reeled as the walls of her carefully constructed world crumbled around her. NovaGenix wasn't just a corporate titan. It was a monster that had devoured everything she held dear. And she had been its willing architect. For the first time in years, Vivian Kessler felt something she thought she'd buried forever. Guilt. Roy Chen's voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the heavy silence. Doctor, Kessler, status update? She pressed the communicator, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Still analyzing. I need more time. Make it quick, Roy replied. Hawthorne wants results yesterday. Vivian Kessler sat in the silence of the lab, her thoughts a storm. Her hands rested on the console, trembling as she stared at Kai, still restrained and motionless on the table. The memory of her niece, Leela, in Kai's mind haunted her. Every defense she'd built to justify her work, every excuse she'd told herself, now lay in ruins. She reached for the intercom panel, hesitating for a moment before making her decision. She pressed the button and spoke with a calmness that masked her inner turmoil. I'm concluding the analysis now. I'll have my full report within the hour, she said. Roy Chen's voice crackled back. Understood. Hawthorne is waiting. As the intercom clicked off, Kessler moved toward Kai. She studied him, his sharp features defiant even in restraint. His words echoed in her mind. How many more have to die before you decide enough is enough? She keyed in the override sequence on the console, and with a soft hiss, the collar around Kai's neck powered down. His eyes snapped open, locking onto hers. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cautious, almost disbelieving. "Something I should have done a long time ago," she replied, her voice firm now. She released the restraints on his wrists and ankles. "I'm letting you go." Kai sat up slowly, rubbing his wrists as he processed her words. What changed? Kessler turned away, pacing the room. "You showed me the truth, and I've ignored it for too long. My niece." Her voice faltered for a moment, but she steadied herself. "Lila. She's in there, isn't she? In one of their facilities." Kai's expression softened. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Kessler shook her head. "I've been complicit in all of this. The experiments, the suffering. It was easier to tell myself it was for the greater good. But that's a lie. NovaGenix is a monster, and I've been feeding it." She turned to Kai, determination hardening her features. "We need to expose them. The world needs to see what they've done, and if that means betraying everything I've built, then so be it." Kessler moved to a terminal, typing rapidly. "I'm disabling the lab's security measures. It won't take long for them to notice, but it'll give us a head start." Kai stood, stretching his limbs and testing his abilities. They were returning slowly, the neural suppression fading. "How do you plan to get me out of here?" She pulled up a schematic of the facility on a nearby screen. "You don't need to get out. You need to go up, to the higher levels. That's where the backup broadcast network and the server rooms are located." Kai's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. "That's where I need to be. If I can access the network, I can broadcast NovaGenix's crimes to everyone." Kessler nodded. "Exactly. I'll guide you through the building systems. Security will be tight, but I can disable some of the alarms and redirect patrols. You'll still need to move quickly and quietly." Kai hesitated. "What about you? If they find out you helped me?" Kessler gave him a sad smile. "I'm already a traitor in their eyes. If I can buy you time to get to the server room, it's worth it." She handed him a data chip. "This contains access codes to the broadcast network. It'll let you override their firewalls and upload everything." Kai took the chip, his grip firm. "I'll make sure the world sees it." An alarm blared, red lights flashing throughout the lab. Kessler's fingers flew across the keyboard as she opened the service tunnel hatch. "Go!" she urged. "They'll be here any second." Kai hesitated for just a moment, then turned and sprinted toward the hatch. As he disappeared into the tunnel, Kessler took a deep breath and stepped away from the console. The sound of boots thundered down the corridor, and moments later, Roy Chen burst into the room, flanked by a squad of CorSec operatives. He took in the open restraints and the empty table, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Where is he?" Roy demanded, his voice a low growl. Kessler met his gaze, her expression calm despite the chaos. "Gone, and you'll never find him." Roy's jaw tightened, and he took a menacing step forward. But Kessler didn't flinch. For the first time in years, she felt free. "You've made a mistake, Vivian," Roy said coldly. "Hawthorne will make sure you regret this." She smiled faintly. "Maybe. But at least I'll finally be able to live with myself." Roy raised his communicator, barking orders to seal the facility and begin a sweep. But as the operatives moved to obey, Kessler's gaze drifted to the tunnel hatch, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Kai was out there now, and for the first time, NovaGenix had something to fear. Kai emerged from the maintenance elevator onto level 17, his pulse steady despite the rising tension. The hallway stretched before him, sterile and brightly lit. He moved cautiously, his senses heightened as he listened for signs of pursuit. He hadn't reached the server rooms yet, but he was close. The faint hum of machinery and the occasional whir of automated systems echoed through the pristine corridors. He glanced at the data chip Kessler had given him, his resolve hardening. Each step brought him closer to his goal, and the truth the world needed to see. Then he heard it, the heavy, deliberate clang of boots approaching from the far end of the hallway. Kai turned, his enhanced senses locking onto the figure that emerged from the shadows. Roy Chen stood before him, but he was changed. His figure was grotesquely larger, muscles bulging unnaturally beneath his armor. His skin shimmered with an odd sheen, and veins pulsated with an eerie, glowing light. His eyes burned with a dangerous intensity, filled with a rage that seemed barely contained. "I told them I'd handle you myself," Roy growled, his voice deeper and distorted, reverberating through the corridor. He took a step forward, the floor trembling slightly under his weight. "One more shot of Evolix was all I needed." Kai's fists clenched, his instincts screaming that this fight would be unlike any he'd faced before. "Looks like it didn't do much for your personality." Roy's lips twisted into a snarl. "You won't be so cocky when I crush you." Without warning, Roy lunged, his speed startling for someone of his massive size. Kai dodged just in time, the wall behind him cracking under the force of Roy's impact. Kai countered with a punch, but Roy blocked it effortlessly, his enhanced strength sending Kai skidding backward. The corridor became a battlefield as the two clashed. Kai used his speed and agility to stay one step ahead, but Roy's strength and newfound resilience made every exchange perilous. Sparks flew as Roy's punches shattered light fixtures and dented walls, while Kai's calculated strikes aimed to exploit any weakness he could find. "You think you can stop NovaGenix?" Roy taunted, his voice a thunderous roar. "You're just another failed experiment waiting to be erased." Kai narrowed his eyes, his breath steady despite the intensity of the fight. "We'll see about that." The battle raged on, their movements a blur of speed and power. But Kai knew he couldn't afford to let the fight drag on. The server rooms were close, and every second he spent here risked the mission. He needed to end this, fast. Roy surged forward again, this time slamming Kai into the wall with brutal force. Pain shot through Kai's back as the impact left a crater in the reinforced structure. Roy pressed his advantage, swinging with terrifying strength. Kai ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding another devastating blow. Kai knew he couldn't match Roy's raw power head-on. He needed to outthink him. As his mind raced, he noticed the flickering lights and exposed conduits running along the walls. An idea began to form. Using his enhanced speed, Kai darted to the far side of the corridor, positioning himself near one of the exposed electrical panels. He turned to face Roy, his expression defiant. "Come on, Roy! Is that all you've got?" Roy roared, charging like a runaway freight train. At the last second, Kai leapt aside, grabbing a loose cable from the panel and jamming it into Roy's side as he passed. Kai gritted his teeth as the sparks danced across Roy's monstrous frame, the exposed cable sending pulses of raw energy into his enhanced body. Roy's muscles convulsed, but he barely staggered, his mutated form absorbing the shock with terrifying resilience. "Nice try, kid," Roy snarled, his eyes burning with inhuman intensity. "But it's gonna take more than that." Kai didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the nearby water cooler, its surface covered in condensation from the frigid lab temperatures. With a surge of strength, he ripped it from its stand and hurled it directly at Roy. The water container burst, drenching Roy from head to toe in a cascade of liquid. In an instant, Kai seized another set of exposed cables and drove them into Roy's soaked torso. The effect was immediate. Electricity surged through Roy's body, crackling and arcing violently. He let out a guttural scream, his grotesque muscles spasming uncontrollably. His skin blistered and charred, the Evolix-enhanced tissue unable to withstand the sheer voltage coursing through him. Smoke billowed from his body as the electric current consumed him, reducing him to a burnt, smoldering husk. Kai took a step back, breathing heavily as he watched Roy collapse into a heap of blackened flesh and twisted muscle. "Looks like you finally short-circuited," Kai muttered before turning his attention to the server room ahead. With no time to lose, he dashed through the reinforced doors, his mind racing. The server towers pulsed with data streams, the heartbeat of NovaGenix's corrupt empire. Kai quickly inserted the data chip Kessler had given him into the main console. The screen flickered to life, and Kai's fingers danced over the keyboard. Firewalls flared up, but his hypercognitive abilities made short work of them. One by one, encrypted files spilled open. Blueprints of illegal experiments, logs of human trafficking, and financial records that linked NovaGenix to countless government officials and media outlets. But it wasn't enough. Kai knew he had to do more. He placed his hands on the server tower, closing his eyes and allowing his mind to sync with the system. His abilities surged, threading through the network like an unstoppable virus. Images and memories from his mind, visions of the children, the screams, the cold detachment of the scientists, fused with the raw data from the chip. His thoughts and emotions became a part of the broadcast. Kai activated the emergency broadcast system, linking into the city-wide network. Screens all across the megacity flickered, from the towering skyscrapers of the elite to the crumbling slums of the workers. Every screen, every device, and every comm terminal lit up with the undeniable truth. "People of Nova City," Kai's voice echoed through the airwaves, his face appearing across the metropolis. "For years, NovaGenix has controlled you with lies, enslaved you with their technology, and sacrificed innocent lives for their greed. The evidence you see now, this is the truth, and it's time to rise." The footage rolled, revealing the horrors of NovaGenix's experiments, children locked in sterile cages, dissidents erased from existence, and the grim fate of those enhanced against their will. Gasps of horror and anger filled the streets, and murmurs turned into roars of defiance. Kai stepped away from the console, his heart pounding. Alarms blared behind him. Security forces were closing in fast. He glanced at the screen one last time, seeing the city's reaction unfold in real time. The people had the truth now, and the revolution had begun. With a final breath, Kai activated a viral self-destruct sequence within the server, ensuring NovaGenix would never regain control of their secrets. He sprinted for the emergency exit, dodging incoming guards as gunshots and EN1 pulses rippled through the building behind him. Emerging into the neon-lit night, Kai felt the weight of the battle lift slightly from his shoulders. The people had seen the truth. The fight wasn't over, but this was the first true victory. In the distance, the sound of sirens and gunfire echoed, but so did something else. Chants of rebellion, voices rising in unison. Kai smiled grimly. "For you, Dad. For everyone." And with that, he vanished into the shadows, ready for the next battle in the war for freedom.